Welcome back to the swamp. It's incredible to see that we are already 4 volumes into this series. These people shared their allegedly true stories that will creep you out while they or their loved ones served in the military. Today joining me is my good friend Nightmare Files. He shared his personal scary military story. Much love to everybody who serves in the military, no matter where in the world you are. Be sure to show my friend Nightmare Files some love and check out his channel, which you can find in the description down below. He shares scary stories and true crime and so much more. I definitely recommend him. If you have a story you would like to share in a future episode, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that keep this channel going. Thank you guys for all the well wishes as I was sick. I'm still a little sick, but I'm feeling so much better. Thank you again for all the well wishes. Now, let's get into these allegedly true, creepy military stories. This is my dad's story, not my own. He shared one of his many experiences with me about the time when he took part in the Vietnam War. He joined what was known at the time as the guerrillas. They were a group of locals from the country of Laos, Cambodia, and South Vietnam, trained by the CIA and American Special Forces to fight alongside Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, and the South Vietnamese. North Vietnam was using the northern borders of Laos and parts of Cambodia to transport military weapons to communist troops in North Vietnam. The guerrillas oversaw patrolling the dense jungles and mountains. They were to disrupt and sabotage these supply lines. During this time, my dad and a few of the guys in his troop were captured and detained by the enemies. There were at least a dozen or more men forced to live in a small dungeon or jail chained up like animals. My dad was chained to his buddy, let's call him Phil, by the feet. The living quarters or jail cell was filthy, cold, and infested with rodents. They were only fed once a day with scraps from the guards. They could also cook their own meals with what they would call salvage in the yard. Prisoners were allowed about 15 minutes of going out in the yard for fresh air each day, and then return to their jail cell when the alarm sounds. One day, his friend Phil decided to gather up some green plants he had found growing along the fence line. He told my dad he was getting sick and tired of this stuff that they had been given to eat, so he wanted something different. My dad warned him over and over not to eat it because it was a plant or type of vegetable they had never seen before. Phil wasn't having any of it, so after the soup was ready to be eaten, he offered some to my dad, but my dad declined. Phil said it didn't taste any different from a regular vegetable soup. A day goes by and Phil seems like he's doing fine, but by nightfall, he was really sick and throwing up. My dad was like, "You should have never eaten that plant, man." Phil is continuously throwing up, and then he wanted to lay down because he told my dad he needed to rest. Still chained up by the feet, my dad helped him lay down on his spot on the cold hard concrete floor. A few minutes pass by and he calls out my dad's name. My dad wakes up to find Phil going into some type of seizure because he was shaking uncontrollably. By this time, my dad jumps up and pulls Phil towards him and hugs him so he can transfer his body heat to Phil. The last thing Phil whispers into my dad's ear was, "I'm so cold." My dad told me, while I was hugging him, to keep him warm, I could feel the life draining out of him. I felt his feet, being cold as ice, then the coldness move up his legs, then his arms and hands, and then to his face, and he turned white like a ghost. By now, he was already unresponsive, but I kept talking to him. As his body grew limp, I came to the realization my friend had died. No one came to help. The guards didn't come when I yelled for help. There was nothing I could have done but lay him back down, forcing myself to sleep next to his corpse because I was still chained to him. It was late. The room got so cold. I laid there with my back turned. I could feel the energy shift in the room. There was a feeling of being watched while I tried to catch some sleep, even though I wasn't getting any sleep that night. I then heard a cough next to me which sounded exactly like Phil. I could feel the chains being pulled, but I refused to turn back. I pulled the chains back, and it was pulled the opposite direction again. I kept my eyes closed and laid there with my back still turned. I kept hearing noises throughout the night, like he or something was trying to grab my attention, but I kept my eyes closed and pretended I was asleep. The guards didn't remove his corpse until the next day from the jail cell. This was and has been one of the creepiest stories my dad has ever told me. I hear stories similar to this from both my parents throughout the years. I'll share those stories another time.
I'm Nightmare Files, and this is my personal scary story. I will not use any names in this, at least not the real names. We had already been in Afghanistan for 2 weeks at this point, and our FOB had been attacked at least 6 times already. If you don't know what a FOB is, it's a forward operating base. It was a very small blackout FOB, and we call it blackout because at night, we couldn't have any lights on outside due to indirect fire or sniper fire. Anyways, a week goes by and nothing happens. So our company is being told that we're doing a mission together, a company mission. Usually we had gone on missions at the platoon level, which is one level under company. By this time of deployment, we had been on a few key leader engagements, and nothing much happened. The only contact we received was at the FOB. But a lot of us had a bad feeling about this one. To make a long story short, and we ended up going on mission, and we moved on foot about 2 kilometers to the east at around 1 a.m., and we set up our patrol base at around 3 a.m., and then sent out each platoon to their own sector. Each platoon moved a few kilometers away, while headquarters stayed at our patrol base. I'm on the radio talking with our forward observers from each platoon, and they're reporting up that they can hear the enemy, but they can't see them. At this point, it's still dark, and we are basically in the backyard of the enemy, and this area is known for the Taliban. These guys are freaking out on the radio, as they keep saying the Taliban is out there, but we can't see them. Then at our patrol base, some local man walks up, and our interpreter ends up talking to him. As he's speaking to the interpreter is telling us everything he's saying. At this point, I'm holding my weapon pointed down to the ground, and I slip my finger to the trigger. And I look at the interpreter, with him not knowing that I understand everything he's saying. I tell him, that's not what he's saying, while looking him straight in the eyes. My commander looked at me and said, what? I repeated, that's not what he's saying. The interpreter is lying. The interpreter was telling us that this guy wanted food and water. What he was really saying is that there's Taliban all around us, and they outnumber us, and they knew about everything we were doing before we even came out here, and that they're going to attack us and our FOB. At this point, the interpreter looks at me with wide eyes and starts to run toward his bag. As the interpreter is running toward his bag, he screams, Allah Akbar. When he reached in his bag, he grabbed a detonator, and he squeezed it, and then, boom. He had a bomb in the middle of our patrol base, but it only injured a few of us. He was immediately shot, and all hell broke loose. Shots are coming from everywhere, but we can't pinpoint where. Immediately, 7 people were shot. I got down next to my commander, and I'm on my radio talking to my forward observers, who are trying to call in artillery and mortars. I'm trying to aim my weapon, but can't tell who is who because it's so dark. We have on night vision, but they suck. Guys are screaming that they are hit, and some guys are cowering behind boulders. Then over the radio I hear, I'm not going to use his real name, Sergeant Smith is down. Luckily at this point the sun is starting to come up, and a few of us run over to where Sergeant Smith was, and I saw him. I saw Sergeant Smith, face down and not moving. The medic and I grab and drag him. My buddy was right next to him, and he saw Sergeant Smith's face when we turned him over, and he started crying and freaking out because his face looked like he was screaming, but it was just stuck there. I stopped for a second when I saw his face, but I snapped right out of it. This wasn't my first deployment. this wasn't my first dead body. Sergeant Smith was one of those guys that was really untouchable, an alpha male, very in shape and had everything going for him. When the guys saw that he was killed, they definitely thought that they were next because he was like a super soldier to these guys. I asked my buddy, where did he see the enemy? Where's the Taliban? And he pointed and said, 10 meters that way. I thought to myself, 10 meters? That means that they're inside our patrol base now. I pause and I look around. I never seen so many self-proclaimed tough guys turn into little girls so quick, and so many guys that didn't believe in God start praying for God. I will not go into everything else because it's pretty hard for me. Just know that some of us had to fight with our hands because the enemy was so close to us. We only lost one guy that day, but we had 18 people wounded. 13 of those people were shot, but everyone was mentally wounded and still are. We all thought that we were untouchable because we jumped out of planes, knew how to fight, and lifted weights. Everyone is a tough guy until they have to do tough guy shit.
So my dad was in the Navy for 20 years, and I was alive for the last 13 of those years. Normally, military families, at least for the US military, travel around a lot, and it's not unusual for a family to be uprooted every 2 or 3 years. I was lucky in that after my parents got married, my dad was stationed in Virginia, somewhere in 1993, where both my younger sister and I were born. Shortly after my sister's birth in 1996, we moved to North Florida and have been there ever since. We even lived in the same on-base house for about a decade, from 1997 to 2007, when my dad retired. Needless to say, we grew up used to friends coming and going, depending on their parents' duty station, while we oddly didn't go anywhere. The way the base was set up was that the two houses were connected and went to 123 Street Name A and 123 Street Name B. The house my family lived in was B, and in the early 2000s, a family of 4 moved into A. I was in kindergarten and first grade at that time, so I was at the age where I'm not quite understanding the ideas of divorce and remarriage. The family that moved next door was a blended family in several ways. The husband was black, the wife was white, and the daughter and stepdaughter was white. And the 3-year-old was mixed. I remember this was super confusing for me because I didn't understand how the daughter was white, not realizing she had a different father. He had a brother in the area, so his niece would come over, and she was over so often I thought she lived there, which only added to the confusion. Anyway, apparently they weren't very good neighbors. They'd have house parties at all hours and pound on the walls, which my mom reported to housing. She told me and my sister never to go into their house, and I had no ideas as to why. I did, however, go into the house once for some reason. It stuck in my memory. I had been playing a weird kind of catch with the 2-year-old who wasn't allowed outside and I wasn't allowed inside. So he stood in the doorway and I stood in their covered driveway throwing a ball back and forth. Eventually, the ball went somewhere the 2-year-old wasn't able to reach, so I went outside to retrieve the ball, justifying it as I had only been there for a few minutes after that. The way the house was set up was that the door at the side of the house leads directly into the kitchen, which was separated from the living room by a half wall to the left. I remember going in and looking into the living room, and it was just a complete mess. I couldn't believe how dirty it was. Then out of the blue, the family moved. Usually there was some sort of warning when a family left, but this one, there wasn't. I eventually forgot about them for the most part and continued with my life. Fast forward to 2006 or 2007 and I'm in the 6th or 7th grade. I noticed the niece at my school, but she doesn't remember me. Fast forward again to September 2008 and it's the orientation for my freshman year of high school. She's in one of my classes, so our parents end up meeting and talking. That weekend my mom sits me down and finally explains what happened. Apparently, the husband had gotten into trouble with housing, so his family was kicked out. Well, They left the place an absolute pigsty. The policy for that is the housing sends a cleaning crew, and it comes out of the person's paycheck. Well, a cleaning lady reached up to see if anything was left on a shelf in a master closet, and found something: a stack of pictures. When she looked at the pictures, they were of the girls in my neighborhood, and they were incredibly inappropriate. Keep in mind, these girls range from the ages of 5 to 10. Immediately, the base's police were called and he was arrested. NCIS ended up investigating it, and because my house was connected to theirs, my dad was interviewed about what he knew. He was shown the pictures and asked to identify the girls and if my sister and I had ever gone into the house. My mom told me that my father told her that the pictures were the most depraved things he had ever seen, and they were burned into his memory for the rest of his life. It turned out all of my friends were his victims, including his own stepdaughter, and that he had been bribing them with toys and candy. My family, and another one, were the only two spared because my mom didn't allow me or my sister in that house, and the other family's daughter didn't fit into his age range. My mom explained that she had gotten an uneasy feeling from him, and couldn't explain why. She even tried ignoring it because he was in the Navy. In the end, the couple got a divorce. The husband went to a military prison. He has since been released. And the wife moved back to Canada with her daughter and left her son with her former brother-in-law to raise. I'm in the Navy. I was stationed with a squadron in Washington State. One night I was standing watch, and as the night shift was leaving, my friend stayed back and talked for a few minutes. I don't know how it got to the subjects of ghosts, but my friend told me one of the civilians who worked a supply department said their supply area was haunted by a gray woman, and that they had been hearing voices. I kept an open mind, although the description was just way too generic. Flash forward to the next time I was on watch. We had to move a new hangar across the street. The hangar where my friend told me the ghost still belonged. I decided I needed to check it out that night, even though it was abandoned and empty. The night of my watch, I decided that I was going to try to summon whatever that civilian had seen. So, what do you think I did? I decided I was going to use the woman's bathroom on the second floor. I walked into the bathroom, go into a stall, lock it behind me, and sit down on the toilet to let nature do its thing. After I was done, I decided to just sit there and see if anything would happen. And I swear to God this next part is real. All of a sudden, the stall unlocks, and I could see the bolt turn on its own. The door swung slowly and creepily inward. There was nothing or anyone on the other side of the door. I knew that whatever it is, it did not like me being there. I finished up my business and pretty much ran out of that hangar. I don't know what's out there, but there's definitely more after death, I think. I am 24 now. I am a female and have moved around a lot with my family as my dad was in the military. At the time, my family and I were living in Virginia, near the historic Triangle area. We lived on a military base that had a lot of wooded land with a few roads through it for people to bike on, and it's standard for military stuff. My family, some friends, and I would bike on these roads often. It was very relaxing, and as we traveled in a group, we weren't worried about coyotes or bears or anything of the like. However, we kids were told to be very careful, to never go back on those roads without a parent or ever split from the group when hiking or biking. My best friend at the time and I chalked it up to them being afraid of us being hurt by hunters. The base often allowed hunters in to help take care of any crazy deer populations, or to keep us away in case the military were doing some crazy stuff back there. As you can imagine, since I'm posting here, we were wrong. Though, she didn't get hunted. We were on our bike rides. About 3 families all in our group. My best friends and I started lagging behind, and eventually, we were at the back of the group. As we rounded a corner, I kid you not, A snake fell from the tree branches above onto my handlebars. I naturally wrecked and freaked out, refusing to get back on my bike. I know, temper tantrum of the century. My friend laughed and just rode off, and I called her a traitor for that. I stood there staring at my bike and then down the road and back to my bike. I wasn't getting back on that thing and basically said screw it. I'm walking back as we weren't too far in. I knew the roads very well, even the gravel ones, because my dad would drive me around back there in his Jeep. So I was confident as I walked down the road and turned down a dirt road. As I'm walking down this road, I start hearing rustling behind me. I shrug it off as I'm thinking it's a rabbit, since we had quite a few of those and we've already seen tons of them today. The rustling grew closer, and then was past me and in front of me. Then it stopped. I stopped and decided to bark at it to scare it off. Branches snapped in response. I screamed and took off running. Classically, I ran in the direction of home, which was right by this thing. As I'm running, I hear a growl, but it doesn't sound like a dog growl. It was deeper. I'm not sure how to describe this. It was like there were more than one growl, if that makes any sense. Multiple pitches all rolled into one, and it was chilling. I ran like my life depended on it, and this thing kept pace with me the entire time. Branches snapping and leaves rustling, but still deep enough in the woods that I couldn't make out exactly what it was. The road curved sharply to the left and my feet slid out from under me as I tried to make the turn. I ended up sliding off the road and into a little ditch before the woods began. I'd say it was a 3-foot grassy area off the road. As I scrambled to my feet, I'm pretty sure I was crying. The thing's growling, and growling got louder. It seemed like the growl honestly turned into a laugh. I bolted, and I ran and ran, but didn't feel like I was getting any closer to home. After the curve, I should have seen the main road, but I didn't see it. Off to the left before the main road, there would be a little ruin of sorts. My frantic mind thought if maybe I could get to the ruin, I would be safe. The thing was crashing through the woods on my right, and I saw my life flash before my eyes. I saw the ruins, and I could have laughed in relief, had the thing not been chuckling at me behind me. I could hear it starting to move, and I jumped and dived and fell into the foundation of the ruin. It was 4 walls with an open doorway that I ran into. I don't know why I thought I would be safe there, but I think to this day that I did that. I would have never made it home. The thing was just toying with me and would have soon moved in. As it was, as I turned around in the dirt and looked back to the doorway, I saw fur. Not the brown and red of coyotes. It was black and it was wiry looking. I didn't see a face, just the fur. And these mangled legs. The joints didn't look right. They were like the normal dog legs, but the joints were backward. I would have thought it was going the other direction, but it was clearly moving to the right when the legs were bent. It growled. It sounded meaner than the earlier growls. I expected it to turn around and charge through the doorway at any minute. But I just watched it circle the ruin before going back off to the woods. I didn't leave the ruin until a base officer came and found me. She looked terrified too. My dad recently told me that he had seen hoof prints that had paw pad prints mixed in with it, like some weird goat-wolf hybrid. He also heard laughter behind him as he grabbed stuff from his truck in the morning. The girl who saved me that day says she saw the same footprints. We didn't speak until we reached my house, where my parents were waiting to hug me and yell at me. I didn't tell them what chased me, but when my dad told me years later what he saw and the officer saw, I don't know what it was, but it still freaks me out. The deformed legs makes me think it's a skinwalker. Every time we went riding after that, I would hear growling and catch glimpses of black fur in the woods. I don't know what it was, but I do know for sure it was hunting me. One thing I still don't know is why didn't it come into the ruin after me? Why did the military base have these weird Native American ruins anyway? I guess I can explain that by it just being there when the military base was made. But it's just weird. Thanks for listening to these allegedly true military stories. These were some really creepy events. The military holds all kinds of horror, from witnessing your friends die to allegedly paranormal happenings tormenting whole squadrons. You never know what you will hear coming out of war and from military bases. Once again, much love and appreciation to my friend Nightmare Files who read story number 2. That story was actually his own personal story from his time in the military. Be sure to subscribe to him and check out his videos. He does them on all kinds of spooky things, and I know you'll love them. Much thanks to everyone who is a veteran and is currently serving in our military. It is much appreciated that you keep our freedom safe. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I am always looking for new stories to share. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp, and I'm sure they'd love to hear it. It's stories like yours that keep this channel going, and I truly appreciate everybody who sends in their stories. Also, if you guys want to take Swamp Dweller Scary Stories on the go, no matter where you are, go to anchor.fm/swampdweller. You can find that link in the description or pinned comment as well. It's a great place to download stories, hear them on the go, and it supports the channel. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.